All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar about collective wisdom. We're excited to get started here, but before begin, I just want to let everybody know about how we're managing our time here. So in a moment, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Suzan Briganti. She is the CEO of Totem and a IdeaScale advisory partner. She's going to speak to you all for the next 30 minutes or so, but in 3 sections. And between each section, we'll pause for questions and answers. We'll have to, of course, leave space for us to get through all the sections. So we might not be able to answer all the questions immediately in that time, but we'll have questions at the end. And if we have any questions left over, Suzan will be glad to respond to them via email after the webinar. And we'll respond to as many of them as we can as we're all listening here today. I also wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar, so it will be available after the event is over. We'll send out notice to everyone who registered with a link so that they can find it online and share it, of course, if they want to. And of course, if you have any questions about IdeaScale or today's event, you can forward them to me. And finally, one special note, Suzan has also offered to do a free 1-hour consultation for those who are interested. So if you're interested in being eligible for that, please email me with consult in the subject line, and 3 companies will receive the benefits of Suzan's services for 1 hour. My email, in case you don't already have it, is jessica.day@ideascale.com. Just email me with consult in the subject line. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. Suzan, I will hand
All
things
right.
over to
Well,
you.
thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much, Jessica, and great to be with you all today. Thanks for joining. I'll just give you a very quick, I'll just give you a very quick background on Totem. We're a crowd-powered innovation consultancy based in Silicon Valley, and as Jessica mentioned, we are IdeaScale's advisory services partner, so providing strategic services such as those you'll get a peek into today to IdeaScale clients as well as our own. And we focus really on innovation and insights for global Fortune 500s. And our clients include some of these at the bottom: Procter & Gamble, BP, Kraft, Schwab, Heineken, et cetera. So we're very excited to share with you 3, I think, really powerful ways that you can capture more value from your crowdsourcing engagements and grab the most value you can from all of your crowd innovation efforts. So the first is how to find crowd patterns, and I'll explain to you what that means. But it's very exciting development that we have initiated and have started to prove, and it's become really proving itself very powerful. The next is how to extract insights from your crowd, and we'll describe what an insight is and why you even need them. And finally, how to test crowd ideas so that they can move through your stage gating process. One note, I could probably give a webinar, if not a 2-day workshop on each of these 3 topics. So this is really just a high-level introduction today. You will have enough information to go off and try this on your own, and you can also certainly contact us for further assistance. So let's kick this off. Crowdsourcing, it really all started with an unsuspecting ox. I don't know if you've heard this story, but it's kind of a fun story, and it serves to reground us really in what crowdsourcing it is. It all goes back to the International Exhibition in 1884 in London, when some lordly guy who didn't believe ordinary people could possibly elect representative governments. So he staged an experiment that was designed to prove once and for all the folly of crowds. But lo, it backfired. The great unwashed, who were not experts in animal husbandry or in the meat business, they were just attending the London International Exhibition, guessed the weight of the ox within a single pound. And this really triggered a reappraisal of crowd intelligence. It's been going on for about 75 years, mainly in the sort of social sciences area. In the past 10 years or so, businesses have piled on trying to figure out how to tap this wisdom. And you've probably all heard of James Surowiecki, who authored The Wisdom of Crowds, and he identified the 4 conditions of wise crowds, which are diversity of opinion, independence, decentralization, and aggregation. And he famously asserted that crowds can be smarter than the smartest people in them. And that actually bears repeating. Crowds can be smarter than the smartest people in them. And that means you have to look at the crowd as a body not just look for the smartest individuals in them and focus on their ideas. And that kind of brings us full circle to TED, not a crowd typically dense with butchers or farmers, right? But a few years ago, a speaker at TED repeated the famous ox experiment. And again, the people in the audience, the kind who likes to wear black turtlenecks and Converse, guessed the weight of the ox within a single pound. So that's a fun story. It's an easy one to cite because there was a right answer, right? But this is what's interesting. No one in that crowd that guessed the ox's weight, no single person guessed the right answer. The right answer was not on a short list. The right answer was not what we call the mode in math. I have a fourth grader, so I've most recently been refreshing the concept of modes. So the mode is the most frequently occurring answer in a data set. So none of them was the mode either. And they didn't let management in the crowd get a higher weight in the answer either. The answer was really an average, so each person's answer was treated as equally valuable. So what happens when you take this approach with an innovation crowdsourcing project? Well, we first of all often look at votes, but votes can be misleading. Now, most idea management systems give one vote to each person, and they treat each vote as equal, right? So do votes capture the crowd wisdom? Well, in our research on crowd challenges, we found that votes can be kind of a blunt instrument. They're too easily swayed by three kinds of bias. There's time bias. Ideas that are posted early seem to have more chances to gather steam. There's network bias. The most networked person's idea tends to get the most views. And what we call expression bias, and that can be anything from cute kitty videos to easy, funny, or simple ideas. They tend to get a lot of crowd traction. But the biggest problem with votes is that they're just too impulsive. They're kind of like likes. What is a like? Most often we see the top voted ideas address relatively trivial issues that are rife with a lot of emotion versus large innovation white spaces. So on your screen is an example from a major UK university where we crowdsourced ideas, and the point was this: to help them develop a long-term strategic and differentiating vision for the university. That's what the brief is all about. But the top 20 highest voted ideas were primarily remedial. That means short-term, things that the university should have already been doing. They were expected as opposed to differentiating, and they were tactical as opposed to strategic. And this is not unusual. If you were to tag and describe ideas in a crowdsourcing campaign and look at the top 20 or top 40, whatever number, you'll find that this is the tendency. So that's sort of the flaw in votes. So what about ratings? A lot of crowd innovation systems, including IdeaScale, have 5-star ratings. So we analyzed whether idea ratings on dimensions like desirability or feasibility or innovativeness produce better shortlists. And we see, yes, they're better than just votes, but a different set of problems crops up. So ideas posted just before the end of the idea collection phase tend to get fewer evaluations, and sometimes none. So you'll see over on the far left, there's actually no evaluations of a couple of ideas that made it to the top 20. Well, how did they get in the top 20? Management eventually, inevitably throws in their favorites, regardless of any evaluations. And you'll also see the crowd and the experts rate the ideas very differently. Only those ideas in this sort of red oval were evaluated in any sort of similar way by the crowd and the experts. And that can be resolved, and that's not really the topic of our conversation today, but I wanted to share that with you because it's not, just to show that that's not the perfect solution either. But the biggest drawback, maybe even tragedy, of using votes or ratings is that they fail to capture the collective wisdom, the larger patterns in the crowd ideas. Whereas when we treat each idea as equal and capture its main dimensions, we see clear patterns emerge. Here's an example for a global beer conglomerate. We asked the crowd, what's the future of beer packaging? And we see the predominance of ideas dealing with the fact that beer is bulky and heavy. So you'll see saving space was one of the themes that emerged, and easy to transport and easy to carry was another one. And these were actually new packaging innovation white spaces, despite the fact that this client spends millions, tens of millions on consumer research around the globe every year. These problems that were experienced by people who actually like beer, these weren't even beer rejectors, had been overlooked. So these became innovation white spaces that the company pursued as a result of this crowd engagement. So this kind of clarity is incredibly powerful. So hopefully you're seeing feeling my excitement about this way of looking at crowd ideas. But I promise to show you how to find crowd patterns. So here's what we do. Here's your here's your 1, 2, 3. When you're faced with hundreds of ideas, a sea of them, how do you find these patterns? Well, here's what we do at Totem. My team of analysts studies usually the first several dozen ideas that come in. We don't wait for the challenge to be over. We start looking at them. And we write down the themes that we see emerging in the ideas and try to get several ideas on it. Some important points at this stage are that your theme should describe, try for at least 85% of the ideas, or the dimensions, the important dimensions of the ideas should be captured. There's always going to be some that are scattered and that don't really fall into any particular pattern. Another point is that every project has its own unique dimensions, and so the way that the themes that emerge from a technology challenge will be different than from a beer challenge or a consumer packaged goods challenge. So those themes will be unique and distinct for every project you do. And finally, you can't expect the crowd to think this way. So even if you enable tagging of their ideas, the crowd will tend to tag their own ideas in a somewhat self-serving way, I guess, or a purely descriptive way. So if someone submits an idea about, a design that's red and square, they typically will tag it as red and square as opposed to what the benefits are for in the solution or what the problem was that they're trying to solve. So you set up these themes, and you go through and you can tag the ideas according to these dimensions. You can do this by hand. You can do it in Excel. You can do it in IdeaScale. It doesn't really matter the method that you use as long as you're consistent. As you go along, what's interesting is you'll see maybe 1 or 2 additional themes emerge as the ideas come in, and it might cause you to tweak the tagging scheme. You might change it, the way it's described, or you might add a couple of new ones. But what I find is those first several dozen ideas do represent the majority of the dimensions of the ideas. And then you want to go back and check that you apply the scheme to all the ideas and that it still holds up. And then lastly, you want to kind of rise above the trees to the level of the forest and look for the meta pattern. So I will give you an example of this. So this is for a high technology client. It's a global company that in about 5 years will be bringing out a technology that can see everything, hear everything, and remember everything around it. And what we did here is we tagged the ideas according to the key capabilities that the technology had to be able to deliver on. What was the power source? Was it capturing basic, intermediate, or advanced data? Was it processing basic, intermediate, or advanced data? Was it mobile or stationary? Where was it worn, if it was worn? How is it being used? Who is the target and how are we accessing it? So without getting into too much detail about that specific case, you can see, there's a manageable number of decisions that have to be made on each idea. In addition, there was some use case, some different use cases listed. So what was interesting is when we do this, and you literally can then see in Excel or what have you, the patterns that are emerging. And what we saw, there was some good news and some bad news. The bad news first was that the device really had to be always on in order to deliver on most of the use cases, over 60% of them. And right now that capability isn't possible. Everything needs to be plugged in and repowered, but they're working on ways to continuously repower the device, whether solar or photovoltaic or the heat in your body. Numerous different solutions are coming on that will make it possible to have these little devices always on. But the good news was, if they could deliver on that, basically almost 70% of the use cases, meaning things that the consumers wanted to be able to do with this technology, only required basic data capture. And those are all things that they could do today. So they were able to go to management with this analysis and show the promise of this technology, which at the time was sort of in a very far-off lab. And they were able to get 50 engineers on it, and it got moved to headquarters and got fully funded. And so what you see here is maybe the world's first crowd-powered development roadmap. And I had to disguise the actual data on the right, but you can see it was very orderly, and it showed the engineers what to work on first, and when they could crack that, what use cases they would be able to deliver. So it was incredibly clear. And and really mind-opening. And every time we do this, our clients really say this is the most valuable thing in the entire engagement. The crowd ideas are necessary in order to do this, but without going to this next step, the clarity just doesn't happen. So Jessica, do you want to see if anyone has any questions?
Sure. This is a chance for anybody to type in any questions to the questions feed that they might have. We've got one here. Is voting still a valuable tool?
It is a good question. I think voting is here to stay. It's just, I think you have to be realistic that what it's showing is literally more of a popularity score. So if your engagement has to do with, let's say it's an internal engagement challenge, and there's a benefit to seeing what people care about and what they're irritated by, I think it's incredibly important to look at those types of things. But if it's a true innovation challenge, I think it's not sophisticated enough of a method for looking at the ideas. So I would definitely encourage you to also do ratings and then also capture the types of dimensions that we've just shown. So that's, I think, the place of voting is more of an expression of popularity than of innovation value.
And then we've got another question here. So you talked about how you need to review every single idea and analyze it for these themes. Should you always review every single idea, even in communities that have thousands of ideas?
That's a great question. Well, we do have a scalable method for doing that, so we can do that. But if you're doing this on your own, that might be a bit overwhelming. So what I would suggest is that you look at several different views and try to get it down to a manageable number, like a couple of hundred of ideas. And you might want to look at ideas, first screen out any that are unclear, any that aren't relevant, obviously. Look at ideas, put more attention on those that are very well developed, fully developed. If you have ratings enabled, you could also look at the ones that are highest rated, and then ask people for outliers. Did an idea catch your eye for some reason? There are a lot of what I call sleepers, and when we're actively moderating challenges for clients, we actively look for sleepers, and those can be ideas that, due to the way they're expressed, tend to get fewer views. They could be very complicated or maybe obtuse, and so you want to elevate those. So once you're confident that you have a good batch representative of all those different types of potentially valuable ideas, then put your focus on analyzing those. Good question, though.
We've got another question here. The search
Okay.
for patterns and themes looks like affinity clusters described by various design thinking methods. Is that correct?
I don't know what affinity clusters are, so I'm sorry. Maybe you could explain that a little bit more, and we can bring that question back up in the next break. Should we try
Excellent.
that?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
move forward into the next section.
All righty. Okay, so we've talked about how to extract patterns. So the next thing we promise is to show you how to extract insights. And first of all, I want to just sort of mention what an insight is and explain its importance. So at Totem, we have a definition of insights. An insight is the expression of a problem in a way that is both relevant and fresh to the intended user. So the important points here are that the insight is always from the perspective of the intended user of the innovation, okay, or the person experiencing the problem. And then the second point I wanted to make on this slide is why insights are so important, and that is that innovations really have two parts. They embody an understanding of a problem and a solution to the problem. And in fact, it's pretty valuable if you can understand a new problem, one that no one else is addressing, or bring a new understanding to an existing problem. Either one of those can really rocket power your innovation efforts. And then the next thing is that you want to express that problem in a way that creates interest and empathy in the intended buyer. That's really the atomic bomb of innovation. And I'll give you a good example of that. It's really kind of half of positioning. When Edison finally succeeded at his light bulb invention, he decided to go out with it as the dripless candle. And what's genius about that is that it immediately telescopes to the user what problem it is that they're solving. They didn't get into, here's the kind of wire we used, or here's the kind of gas that's inside your light bulb, how long it'll last, or any of those sort of more techie things. They nailed the most immediate benefit that caused people to, back at that time, nod their heads and feel like, of course, they need this. So that's what insights deliver, that sort of blinding glimpse of the obvious. A final point is that problems can have functional dimensions, and those are often ones that we focus on, especially if you are in R&D or engineering, but they also have equally important emotional, experiential, and social dimensions, or they can have. And that explains really the difference in success between all of the MP3 players that existed in the market when the iPod came out. The iPod recognized and gave equal attention to the emotional, experiential, and social dimensions of listening to and sharing your music. So this is really important. And insights can be responsible for 20 to 50% of the success of your innovation. So this is as important as the solutions. So just to give you a feel for what insights are, I've got 3 examples of great insights here, one from beer, one from tech, and another one from a consumer packaged goods space. And I'm just going to read them, and you'll hopefully feel the power of these. So I see discovery in life as a game that I like to play, which is why I get excited when I discover truly new tastes in drinks. This is for a beer company. Next, I love to share videos of the best parts of my day, but I don't always know when great moments are going to occur. So I end up either missing a lot or capturing too many boring bits. And finally, household spills can sometimes cause an unexpected reaction in me. The faster I can resolve household tensions, the better for my family. So what you can hopefully feel in all of these is, number one, they're all from the I or we perspective, the user's perspective. Another is they use relatively short sentences in simple but vivid language. And they don't try to solve the problem. They're not trying to sell a solution. They're simply trying to nail the problem. So here's how to extract crowd insights. First of all, when I'm going through the ideas, or my team's going through the ideas, we don't just capture the themes that you just saw. We go and we capture the underlying problem. You want to look for recurrent problems, obviously ones that are very popular, but you also want to look at new unfamiliar problems, things like in the beer case that you're not currently working on. You weren't even aware that they were problems. And a few tips as you go through the ideas. Many ideas just describe a solution and maybe the benefits to their solution. So you'll have to deduce the problem. Some weak solutions, meaning the idea is kind of weak, but they could contain important problem statements or imply important problem statements. You want to also make sure you take a look at that. Then finally, problem statements are extremely sensitive to language. One moment. Just having a sip of water here. So once you've gathered your potential problem statements, you want to spend several hours trying to state them in simple, vivid language, and definitely enlist the best writers in your company for help. So let's say out of a couple hundred ideas, you'll probably have anywhere from 10 to 25 potential problem statements. You might want to batch those out. Give 5 to each person, or you might want to give a few more to a team. And then you'll want to go through and actually optimize them with each other. Kind of go, okay, I like what you've done here, but what I'm feeling here about this, and give yourselves a couple rounds of feedback. Then finally, you want to test insights and do that among the target user or users. You can do that with qualitative, focus groups. You can do it with quantitative methods. And by the way, I do have a vendor that I like very much for validating insights, and you can email Jessica and she'll get a hold of me if you guys would like an introduction to them. So just one more slide with some tips on writing a great insight. As I mentioned, you want to, well, actually I didn't mention this, but you want to structure your insight for success. So typically, we did a study of hundreds of insights, and the ones that actually scored the best usually led with the frustration as opposed to leading with things are all hunky-dory, and that makes sense. You want to use short, sharp sentences as opposed to long, meandering ones because it's easier for people to take it in. The needs or frustrations or problems should be specific to the category. So actually, I'm going to go back and just show you for the 3 examples you saw. This one on the upper left is referencing the category of drinks. It didn't necessarily talk about beer. This one is definitely talking about videos and video sharing, and this last one is talking about household spills. So they're not trying to talk about some high-level human truth that is just too big and doesn't really refer to the specific situation. Number 4 might even be the most important one. You're not selling a solution. You're not even mentioning a solution. So there's nothing to sell. You don't want to be hard selling in any case, but you're not even mentioning the solution. You're just trying to nail the problem. And then the last 2 are more stylistic. You don't want to patronize or invite the end user to join you in patronizing others, and you don't want to gush, using excessively emotional language, because people will push back on that, but you want to write like a human being. And I think all the insights I showed you a couple slides back are good examples of that. So what you're looking for really is a sense of resonance. The end user, when they read these or hear them, should feel, oh my God, you know me better than I know myself. It should be almost an unuttered truth. So it should have a freshness to it, and yet a deep resonance, and hopefully a broad resonance. Then you know you've found a big problem. You want it to underline both, address both the underlying targeted behavior that you want to see and also the underlying psychological driver. So each of those insights contained reference to that. You want to always use user language. And by the way, these statements need to be true. We're not making up problems that don't exist. And we're not, making people worried and insecure about their lives. We're trying to discover problems that already exist. And that will have the power to excite people and offering a new perspective. Okay, so this is a lot, and again, I can give a 2-day session on each of these topics, but these are quick pointers. Enough to get you
Definitely
going.
a lot to work with here, Susan. We already have a question coming in.
Right, go ahead.
What have you found to be the most effective method for capturing these problem statements?
Well, it's just human observation. There's really no machine that can do it. As you go through the ideas, I'll literally either take a piece of paper or I'll start an Excel deck, and I'll really just start literally copying and pasting some of these things that come in, these sentences that come in from the crowd, and then I'll start to look for recurring ones. So I'm really looking for things that are interesting, that have almost a vibrational power to them. And you just record them, and then you sit back and you start to distill. So you'll start to see, oh well, these last 10 of these last 50 ideas I've just looked at are all pertaining to X, and what is that need state? So at that point, you'll have a bunch of different ways that the crowd has talked about that problem, and that's where just the hard work of writing begins. And you try to write that, in short, simple sentences that begin with I or we, and use these examples I've given you as models, and you'll get better at it over time. And if you start testing these things, you will, as a company, get better, because you'll learn in your specific category, with your specific customer and your specific products, what the magic way is that you need to frame insight. So it's really an incredibly important innovation skill that a lot of innovation departments don't spend enough time on. So you just have to really do it and learn by doing. Or obviously my company specializes in this, so feel free to tap us as well.
Excellent. We have some more questions coming in, but why don't you do your third section, and then we'll get to the rest of those questions in the final Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Well, about 2/3 into this, I thought it was time for an entertaining picture again, and this was a real live picture from the internet. I just love it. I guess people really do compete with their bunnies in some parts of the world. So the point of this is converting ideas that come in from the crowd so that they can sail through your stage gating process. The point of innovation is to have more and better ideas moving faster through your stage gating process, right? So everything I'm showing you today will help you do that. So we're going to show you literally how here to test crowd ideas. All right, so first of all, let's talk about why we even need to do that. And the reason that we developed this method is that if you've done crowdsourcing, you've already experienced this. The ideas come in such disparate media as well as disparate degrees of finish. So, in one challenge alone, we received ideas in the form of videos, animations, rough sketches almost on Post-it notes, 60-page PowerPoints, as well as simple text. And just for fun, I'll play one video. that goes on, but for time's sake, I'll stop it. And I do apologize for the typos. That idea, which was CAD rendering put into video, came from Romania, believe it or not. So they probably used Google Translate. But you know the pain I'm talking about here. And if you're even looking at ideas that come in text form, some will be a single line, almost a haiku. Others will be almost like a PhD paper. And so the degree of finish on the ideas and the dimensions that they address in their idea write-up can vary dramatically. And finally, the problem with this is that executives are not really used to evaluating ideas in that kind of a rough form, right? So because of this, disparate formats and media, we have to do what we call normalizing of ideas in order to be able to fairly evaluate them apples to apples, right? So here are some tips on how to test crowd ideas. Well, first of all, you won't be surprised to hear that I'd like you to focus on testing solutions that solve some of your top scoring insights. If you've done step 2, which was the insight extraction, and gotten some feedback on those, you'll know what the biggest pain points are that you want to solve. So testing a solution that's disembodied from a problem statement is really kind of wasting money. So you want to focus on solutions that address your top scoring insights. Next, you might want to take 8 or 10 or 12 of what you think are your best solutions that tie to those top scoring insights and craft them using a consistent proven concept format, which I'll show you in a minute. And then you want to evaluate the concepts, and you can do that in a number of ways. You can use qualitative, like focus groups, which is never as conclusive, but it's sometimes the quickest, or quantitative methods. You can just ask your market research department to do that for you. And we're actually really enjoying experimenting with prediction markets for concept testing as well. You can get a hold of me if you're interested in that. But the point of testing your crowd ideas in this kind of a consistent format is it allows you to detect which parts of the concept are working and which ones aren't. So you always lead with the insight. You'll already have validated that. But what you want to make sure of is that the solution actually is addressing that insight. And if you see a weak link between the insight and the solution, you'll know that there's a problem there. Then there's the actual solution itself and how it's described. There are the benefits to the end user, the reasons you should believe the benefits, some sort of a relative value statement. That one's kind of optional. And then the visualization. These are all things that you're going to need for go-to-market. And so by undertaking the discipline to lay this out this way, you'll be able to test your concepts apples to apples. So this is a template. Obviously, you guys can download the recording of this. You can take a screenshot of this if you want. But this is sort of a well-proven format for writing concepts. You start with that end-user insight. You state the benefit, the reason to believe. There's optional price reference, and then the tagline and a visualization. This is an example of a real concept that was tested using this method that did extremely well for Heineken. I actually was not part of this project. And then you see this actual product in the market. This is available worldwide now. This is the Heineken Draft Keg. So this process is how it works, and it's incredibly helpful for comparing crowdsourced ideas on an apples-to-apples basis. So I make this sound easy. It's not. This takes days, if not weeks, to get these concepts written, without too many words, but just the most descriptive words. And sometimes I'll even do what I call a pulse check, and I'll let us, 6 or 12 consumers kind of give their quick feedback on it before we go out and we spend bigger money on concept testing. So, so that's kind of a quick coverage here of the concept testing step. So Jessica, should we take some last questions, and then we've got a little bit of a wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. One of the questions that it's interesting that we haven't really mentioned it up to this point is when you talk about the crowd, where are you finding the crowd?
Well, very good question. So I would say about half of our clients are using internal crowds, meaning employees, and about half of them are using external crowds. And if it's an external crowdsourcing challenge, that's something that Totem is usually engaged to recruit. And we recruit them usually using online methodologies. So given almost any topic, there are hundreds of interest groups on the web that are discussing it. So we find those using kind of ethnography and invite ourselves into the conversation and let people know that we have a challenge launching. We ask permission of the community manager to see if they'll post it, and there's always online advertising and keywords and partners and all that kind of stuff. So we're very good at this sort of recruiting piece, but again, if that's something you need, you can contact Jessica and she can refer you.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Is there a way to compensate for voting bias?
Well, different software, different idea management software, some of them don't attempt to do that. There are various ways that the different companies attempt to do that, but I actually think IdeaScale's randomizer widget is probably the most effective because it serves up ideas in random order so that the crowd sees them. So obviously that overcomes time bias, it overcomes network bias. It doesn't really overcome expression bias though. So you'll still have, very accessible ideas, sometimes getting an outsized share of the voting. But I think it's probably the simplest and best solution I've seen out there. But again, always look at your voting as more of an expression of popularity than of, the full assessment of the innovation power of the ideas.
All right. Why don't we wrap it up and see if there are any more questions that come in at the end here.
Okay, sounds good. So what we've learned today is how to find those crowd patterns that can open up innovation white spaces and bring clarity from your crowd engagements. You've learned how to extract insights from your crowd and how to test crowd ideas. And you have enough information to be dangerous here, but I just encourage you to jump in and try it. How do we know any of this works? Sorry, I just wanted to play this video because it's just so funny. These guys obviously don't know how anything works. But here's how we know that this works. A Heineken example, I've had to mask out the actual data, obviously, for confidentiality. But we extracted insights from a global crowd challenge, and we decided to test 7 of them. And 5 of the 7 insights scored in the top 20% globally. And you see on the right the insight strength, the dark green means top 20%, and the dimensions that were in those columns were relevance, freshness, and talkability. So 5 of the 7 scored on the top 20 on all 3 of those dimensions, which is pretty shocking. And then, why is my machine not advancing? There we go. And then what we did, we're very disciplined, and we only tested solutions that were tied to top scoring insights, which is what I suggested that you do in the future. And when we did that, normally you get 1 or 2 concepts that would pass the benchmarks for commercialization. In this case, all 7 of the 7 that we tested exceeded their benchmarks for commercialization and scored in the top 20%, again, globally. So we had an embarrassment of riches here. And so what we did was we kept working on concept number 1, and it ended up not being technologically feasible yet and had some environmental issues. Number 2, and we went pretty far with that, and it got blocked for PR reasons. And number 3, we were able to go ahead and take to market. It's now in 19 countries. It's marketed under the name Radler in the Foster's brand in Australia, and under Amstel in Greece and Kaiser in Brazil. And Radler is actually one of the most successful volume innovations that Heineken has ever had. And the client was promoted to head up front-end innovation and all product development globally for Heineken. So it's a really great win for her as well as for the company. So hopefully you'll find this stimulating and promising. And just to shore up your confidence, these are all methods that Totem has developed just through a lot of iteration. It is possible for you guys to do it, so I encourage you to jump in and try. And they are skill sensitive, and some of them are kind of time intensive, so welcome to contact me through Jessica or at Suzan at Totem Brand. Please notice Suzan is spelled with a Z in the middle, or my phone number, which is 415-290-2476, or welcome to reach out on Twitter. My handle is @Skuzin, Skuzin. So thank you, Jessica. And if there's time, I don't know if you want to take any other questions. I'm definitely willing. But for everyone else, thanks very much for joining.
Yeah, definitely. I think, please, I encourage our audience here to submit any other questions that they might have, even if we don't get to them right now. We'll hopefully follow up later via email. We had one just come in that I think is an interesting a question for your opinion here, Susan, is do you think market methods, payment for ideas, improve or make less valid the crowd approach?
Do you mean paying the crowd for submitting them, or are you talking about a prediction market where they're betting their own money?
I think that this is reward based
Hmm.
for ideation, but I'll leave it
Yeah.
to this person to clarify if I'm wrong about that.
Okay. Okay. Well, I do think rewards are important and expected. The couple of occasions where I've seen clients not offer rewards was when it was an internal employee challenge. But I look at rewards really a bit differently. When it's an internal challenge, let me address this in two parts. One is internal, one's external. So for internal, you're already paying the people. Some companies resist the notion of giving out rewards. I don't think rewards need to be monetary. And in fact, what I've heard from crowds is what is most motivating to them is more experiences, or in the case of internal challenges, the chance to participate on some elite project team, that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be financial. But probably 75% of crowd motivation is intrinsic, so you want to tie your rewards to that fact. Money is sometimes cheapening, and it can turn something fun and enjoyable into a job. So think about rewards more from that perspective. In terms of external rewards, um, I don't like a winners takes all kind of approach. I like to be more inclusive and offer levels of rewards so that more people can get rewarded for different kinds of behaviors, not just the winning idea, but perhaps being the most supportive member of the community or offering the most insightful comments. So I think it does improve, rewards do improve the quality of crowd submissions, but again, I would caution because that doesn't necessarily mean monetary, and the reward should reward a broad array of positive behaviors that you want to see.
I agree. I'd say that that's something that we see in a lot of our IdeaScale communities too. One of our best use cases, of course, that's so many people are familiar with is the SAVE Award. And there's no monetary award for the ideas that are literally saving millions of dollars for taxpayers. What the reward is that they get to present their idea to President Obama and
Yeah.
participate in that solution.
Yeah, fantastic. That sort of thing works even if you're not working in the White House. I mean, I've just done a project for a big bank in Africa, and they do have monetary rewards. And what we heard from both the innovators and the champions was they wanted a chance to be at the big table. They wanted to join in elite projects. They wanted to be sent to an international innovation conference. Those are the kinds of things that make them feel appreciated, not some $50 or the equivalent of in rand in their paycheck that nobody else sees but them.
Let's do this one last question and then we'll sign off for the day. I think this is definitely something that you could speak to, Susan, is can this work on something emotional and political like the immigration issue?
Can crowdsourcing and the extraction of themes and insights?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, insights always have an emotional dimension. It doesn't mean that you're going to express it in a very raw way, but I think on any human need, that all three of these things really work, whether it's extracting the bigger patterns, crafting the insights, or drafting concepts. That yes, it can work on public and gov and civic issues as well. I haven't actually done it, but I think it would work.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Susan. Thank you, everybody else, for joining. This will be available afterwards so that you can share it with other people who might find it helpful. And again, if you're interested in a free 1 hour consultation with Susan, please email me with consult in the subject line. Looking forward to hearing more from you as time goes on, Susan. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks, Jessica. Bye-bye.
Bye.